Welcome to Inside the Learning Experience podcast, where we dive into some of the learning design and research projects we're working on at WGU Labs. I'm Betheny Gross, the research director at WGU Labs. We're back again to talk about our project to build an AI-powered student support resource that we, at least for now, are calling STU. Today, my colleagues Betheny Reeves and Youngki are joining me to talk more about what we're learning from students as we design this tool. Stephanie, Youngki, hi. Just take a really quick minute to tell us what you do here at Labs.
Yeah, my name is Youngki. I'm a senior research scientist at WGU Labs. My background is in social psychology, but at Labs, I'm interested in working with large data sets, using methods like machine learning to better understand student experience and support them, especially those from underserved and underrepresented communities.
Awesome. Stephanie?
Yeah, so I'm Betheny Reeves. My background is in social psychology and especially examining factors that influence experiences of belonging and success in higher education for students who are members of historically marginalized or underserved groups. Here at Labs, I conduct research looking into students' experiences within higher education and their perceptions of the learning experience, especially related to digital learning and educational technology use.
Stephanie's done quite a number of survey studies with students about technologies, and you can find all of those on our website. So one of the things I really love about our work is that we are committed to having students inform our direction and our thinking on our projects. We make it a priority to reach out to students with surveys, we do interviews, we involve them in co-designs, we do user testing with them, all of these things. Their input is always really important to us. So today in our discussion as we go forward, I really want to kind of connect and learn from you what we are taking away from our students. What are the insights they're giving us and feedback they're giving us that we use as we develop STU? But before we get started, Youngki, can you just give us a super quick explanation of what we imagine STU to be, just to kind of give everybody who maybe didn't see the other two podcasts a quick idea of what we're trying to do with this resource?
Sure, yeah. STU is an AI-powered tool that is designed to support and provide guidance to WGU students for now, but eventually beyond WGU and other institutions. So essentially, it's a chatbot that can provide guidance to students. But the unique aspects of STU is that it knows about students, so it has access to student data, so it can provide personalized guidance and support to students, as well as provide more of a proactive support. So rather than reacting to student requests, it can predict what needs there might be of the different students and reach out to students even before they realize they might need help. So it has access to all the knowledge of WGU and how students are progressing, so it can provide all that support.
Great. So I know that one of the important things that we are learning along the way is whether and in what way students might use this resource. So we'll learn more about that in a little bit. Stephanie, can you help set the stage for us? What exactly is the problem we're trying to solve for with students?
Yeah, so one of the things that we see when we look at patterns in student data is that many students are not kind of getting the help that they need when they need it. And as a result, many of the students are less successful in their educational journey or are kind of, not completing college in kind of extreme cases. And we also know that institutions are providing their students with a lot of supports. So things like academic coaching and tutoring, mental health supports, career services, financial aid, a whole host of wraparound support that would help students kind of be successful in their educational journey. But we know students also aren't always using these supports when they need it. So that could be because they're not aware of the supports. Maybe they feel like reaching out for help and using these supports is stigmatizing or kind of indicates kind of a weakness on their part. But for many reasons, students aren't getting the help that they need when they need it. And so we kind of designed STU or are designing STU with these problems in mind. So finding a way to kind of proactively reach out to students and get them connected with the support that they need to kind of help them be successful in their educational journey.
So, Stephanie, can we back up just a little bit? I wanted to understand a little bit more. Why is it such a big issue? Like, if students aren't reaching out for help, is it that they don't need it? What do we understand happens when students don't get the help they need? I know that there's a lot of research out there. You can just fill in those gaps for us.
Yeah, so in many cases, getting help early on, especially kind of right when students start their college journey, so in those first semesters, can be really helpful for kind of setting them up for success throughout their educational journey. So we know that when students are kind of struggling in the first couple semesters, they're more likely to drop out down the line. We also know, in my previous life as an academic, I did some work looking at how students experience kind of what I called these kind of bureaucratic hassles in the transition to college. So this would be things like figuring out what courses they need to take to kind of finish their degree, getting and applying for financial aid, the things that aren't necessarily related to course content, but are important for being successful in the institution. And I found that experiences with those kind of bureaucratic hassles were they correlated with students' sense of belonging, particularly for students who were the first in their families to attend college, so first generation college students. So people who experienced more of those bureaucratic hassles had lower belonging in college. And so that's important because we know that belonging is a really important predictor of retention in college and success in college down the line. So when students are struggling with these aspects of college but they're not getting help, they're more likely to kind of have worse outcomes in their higher education journey. And this is particularly true for students who are members of underserved groups like first generation college students.
So we know that it's really important for students to get the help that they need. This not only keeps them on track with their schooling, but it really kind of builds that sense of confidence and belonging in this experience as a college student. But at the same time, we also know, and you say we know that a lot of students don't get the help they need. How do we know this?
So we've looked at kind of our own institutional data here at Western Governors University, and we see that, a lot of these resources have low utilization rates. We also conducted a survey a couple years ago with some of our external partners in the College Innovation Network. And we saw that there was also very low utilization rates for student supports like, career counseling, academic tutoring and coaching, things like that. And this is echoed throughout a lot. There's a lot of research showing that these types of student supports go underutilized. And there's also some research showing that underserved groups of students are less likely to utilize some of these supports as well. We also did a series of interviews with students at our institution to kind of look at their utilization rates, kind of understand why they might not be using the supports that are available to them. And we saw a really similar pattern. So many students reported that they hadn't used the available supports, and we're unaware of some of them as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie. So, Youngi, based on what you're learning from students and what we're seeing in surveys and interviews that we've been doing, why do you think STU has some potential here?
So as both Stephanie and I are part of this team that's building Stu, but our job is to really understand students' perspective. So from the user's standpoint, who will be using this and whether they will be ready for something like this and how they'll react to something like this. So yeah, so we conducted a large-scale survey across nearly 1,000 students who are currently enrolled at WGU to better understand their perception of the student support resources that are currently available at WGU and whether they are using them actually, and if not, what are the reasons for not using them. And like Stephanie said, based on previous research and literature, we see a clear gap between awareness of these different resources. So students know that these resources exist, and universities like WGU invest a lot of money and time into developing these resources. But compared to awareness, the utilization is very, very low, less than 20% of students actually use these resources regularly. And we also asked them what are some of the reasons that they're not using these resources, and it turned out reasons like lack of time, their perception that these resources are not for them. So they don't know how some of these resources could be helpful for them. So they have a hard time connecting the dots between what they need and how they can, address those needs.
So, do you think that students aren't reaching out for these resources? And that seems to be a pretty consistent finding in our surveys and in the research that you and Stephanie have done. But why do we think that they would rely on a chatbot? Why would a chatbot change anything?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we also ask students how we could improve their usage of these resources. And one of the most common answers were having sort of this centralized resource hub, which is exactly what Stu is going to be. So Stu will have access to all these different resources. Students can just ask and it can provide and direct students to the right resources. And another common answer was having more proactive notifications about the resources. So, like I said earlier, we want Stu to be providing not just reactive support, but proactive support. So, reaching out to students even before students realize that they might need help. So, those are some of the really core features of Stu. And we're really glad to see that those are aligned with what students want in tools like this.
So, Youngi, what are the limits? Like, where are the boundaries for students as to whether they will sort of turn to a chat bot for this kind of help?
So that's an empirical question that we would love to continue to explore. But based on what we surfaced in this survey, we see that students, while they see an AI tool like Stu as something that's very positive, a really helpful addition to their normal WGU studies, they see AI tools as having very limited capabilities, so such as providing just the quick answers to some administrative questions, but we want Stu to be providing much more than that. So provide things like more complex academic and career guidance, and even be able to provide some sort of motivational encouragement, accountabilities. But students don't really currently see that as a possibility. But we would love to explore that, because as students start engaging with these tools and technologies, their perceptions could also evolve and they might soften up a little bit more.
Yeah. What are your hypotheses as to why students might be a little bit reluctant or skeptical at this point to help with some of those more complicated tasks?
AI is still new, even though it's becoming more and more widespread commonplaces. We might have this preconceived notion that AIs and technologies are for certain things, whereas some of these more complex support, they might think that it requires human touch, flexibility. But with this development of technology, current rate of development, and anything is possible. The AI is getting more and more, advanced and can provide human-like logical thinking. So it's just in my opinion, it's just a matter of time until AI could start to at least mimic some aspects of these support and guidance that students still think as limited to human mentors.
Yeah. One thing that I think we talk about a lot, and I just wanted to bring it up with you, and Stephanie, feel free to jump in here too, is I think we worry that whenever we introduce a new technology to support students, that there are some students who are really comfortable with technology and some students who are not. And I could imagine in the context of AI and chatbots and things like this, that there might really be kind of a gap of comfort and familiarity that ends up kind of separating people in terms of those who are comfortable using this resource and those who are not. What are you seeing so far from students in the sort of receptiveness to this kind of technology supporting them?
I can answer that. So I think the work that we've done to survey students on their perceptions and experiences with AI is really relevant to this question. So we recently did a survey with over 4,500 students at WGU, and we asked them a host of questions about their perceptions, their usage, and kind of what they're looking for from AI tools. And we did see that some notable gaps in who is kind of comfortable and confident in their ability to use the tools. Specifically, we see a pretty big gender gap. So we see that men are much more likely to be aware of the tools, like they're even more likely than women to even kind of know about the tools and be familiar with them. They're more likely to say that they're using them in their academics. And they're also reporting more confidence with the tools as compared to women. So they're more likely to say that they kind of know how to use AI to support their study routines. They're confident in their ability to write effective prompts. And so I think that's something we really need to think about when kind of rolling out these tools is, we might think of these tools as kind of providing a more level playing field for our students. But I think that a first step before we get to that is making sure our students feel comfortable with the tools and can kind of engage with them in effective ways.
Have we noticed any differences across students in terms of who's comfortable with chatbots specifically?
I have not seen evidence of that specifically. This is kind of more just their general confidence and comfort with AI in general. But I think that that's a good future question for research.
I can speak to that just a little bit. So, in addition to the survey, we also tested a very early version of Stu with a small group of students. It had a very limited capabilities, so sort of just providing resources when students ask what they need. And what we found is that, and we only recruited students who were first generation, those students, as Stephanie said earlier, who are less likely to reach out for help and less likely to utilize some of these resources. But what we found is that nearly everyone think this chatbot is very easy to use and very helpful to their daily WGU experience. So I don't think that the chatbot itself could be a barrier for students to using these resources more widely. But maybe there's this perception that it's just limited to answering quick questions, could limit their experience. We might not be able to see the student reach its full potential, at least for now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the user testing. Was there anything else you took away from that initial user testing, understanding that it was still a very limited tool? And actually, if you watch the podcast that we did with Jeremy, he actually shows folks that version of Stu.
Yeah, so besides the takeaway that students find it very helpful and very easy to use, we also asked them what could improve this early version of Stu, and we found this consistent pattern of responses where students say maybe more personalization would be helpful. So maybe if Stu knew more about me, what program I'm in, how I'm doing, what courses I'm taking, and it could provide more detailed, more tailored guidance to them. So we're excited to hear that because that's exactly the feature that we're building into the next versions of Stu. So yeah.
So, this is a question kind of for both of you, but what are the big outstanding questions that you think we need to answer or solve for over the next few months as we continue to develop Stu?
In my experience, kind of working at WGU Labs and doing evaluations of ed tech products, I think something that I've seen pretty consistently is you can have an amazing product that works really well and would be beneficial, but I think it can be difficult to get students to use the tool and to kind of roll it out in an effective way. So I think we need to kind of really dig into the student experience and get student perspectives to see how we can kind of integrate this tool into their experience in ways that make using it and turning to it when they need help pretty like seamless and easy, so that we can actually get students using it. Because if students aren't using the tool, we're not going to kind of see the benefits of it. And I think including students in that process and getting their feedback and kind of listening to what they're telling us is going to be really critical for that.
And what does that look like, getting students' input on something like that?
So I think, it could be doing a survey with students, could be doing kind of interviews. We have a really great learning experience designer team here that is really great with conducting kind of co-design sessions. So we're kind of working with the student to design the learning experience that they think is going to be most effective for them. But I think, above all, it means kind of reaching out to students and getting their feedback and perspectives in some way.
Youngi, what about you?
So the question that I'm really interested in, I touched on this a little bit earlier, is why do students think that STU or AI tools like STU cannot provide more complex support, like emotional, motivational support, accountability? And there are multiple questions that we can ask around that. So first of all, why? What's the reason behind that? My hypothesis is that in order to provide those types of support, you need to build a relationship between a mentor and a student, or an AI chatbot and a student. And in order to build a relationship, you need to have memory. So you need to have a prior interactions. You need to remember what you talked about, your previous interactions. And just seeing it as an AI tool, students might think that it lacks us that capability, but that's to be explored. But I also want to understand if we know that's the barrier, how can we break that barrier? So can we make students think that, oh, it can actually provide those types of support? And if so, how do their perceptions evolve over time? And as a result, do they show improved outcomes, not just academic outcomes, but also things like sense of belonging? Do they feel like they feel supported by these AI tools or AI chatbots? And as a result, feel more higher sense of belonging at WGU, which is related to all sorts of positive academic outcomes as well.
That's great. Well, I really appreciate that. I'm going to just jump in here with the one big question I have for Stu, because I'm actually really involved in this project as well. And one thing that I'm really curious to know and to learn over time is if Stu, even though it is a technology that we're using to support students and to provide them with information and resources and connections that they need to continue to succeed in their degree programs, I'm also curious to know if this can be a tool that we use to connect students to other students and actually help them to build the social relationships that they might be seeking, or to help students to connect directly with alumni that we have and build out the social networks that they need. So in a sense, that this technology actually, because it knows students, because it's there, it's sort of present in their learning experience pretty constantly, because it will sort of be available through their learning system. Could it be used to actually help students build the social connections, the interpersonal social connections and networks that will also help them thrive in their learning? Well, this has been a really great discussion. Thank you, Youngi and Stephanie. I'm excited to see what comes next with Stu.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was a great discussion.
This has been Inside the Learning Experience podcast from WGU Labs. Thanks to everybody who is listening in, and we'll see you on the next one.